Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
And we've got two great guests for you this week. We've got Michael J. Sullivan and his wife Robin Sullivan. Michael's the one whose books you've probably seen, but Robin apparently does a lot of the behind-the-scenes marketing and managing a lot of his work. So we're going to talk to both of them. For those of you who have been, I guess when I was coming on board as an indie back in December 2010, Michael was already really selling well with his fantasy novels. And he started out, I guess, trying to get traditionally published, but then turned to self-publishing when the Kindle came out and it became more viable. And he had a lot of success with his Rhaenyra fantasy novels. And I still remember, Michael, that you painted the covers for it, which was really cool. I thought they were some awesome covers. And he was eventually picked up by Orbit, and he's publishing with them now. And he's also done 3 successful Kickstarters, including the most recent one last fall, where he brought in over $80,000. So we're going to be asking him about indie stuff, trad stuff, Kickstarter, everything you guys might want to know. But why don't you guys welcome to the show and give us a better introduction than I did, if you want to.
Hi, that was a great introduction. I don't have any problem with that. Usually people go on and it annoys me because I feel bad. But no, this is my wife. Yeah, she's the one who basically made me successful I can write a book, but it's not that much until someone actually, knows I have written a book, and she's the one who managed to do that. She got me with my agent. She learned how to do self-publishing back before Kindle. We were actually printing books out of our, selling them out of our trunk of our car. But luckily the next year Kindle did come out. But she figured out how to do all that. She learned how to do everything you can do about self-publishing. And then I got published through a small company, which she had all this knowledge but couldn't do anything with it. So she started doing classes, and after that she just was like the guru of self-publishing for a long time.
I've learned a few things over the years.
You have, and that's you have no use for it because now I'm kind of doing enough of it. But yes, you instruct others now.
And I'm always thinking of new and exciting things I can do. It seems like if when you talk about authors and what they do and how they do it, I think Michael's probably the most diverse because he has self-publishing, small press publishing, traditional publishing. We do a lot of selling direct. We do Kickstarters. We do a lot with audio. So, we have a very diversified portfolio in how he gets his word out.
Awesome. Well, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got those first novels out and how you became successful? I mean, I know this was about 7 or 8 years now with indie publishing and things have changed a bit, but How did you kind of get the ball rolling there in the beginning?
Well, let's see, I got the books done. I wasn't going to publish them originally because I had tried for a very long time and it never went anywhere. So I kind of gave up. And then I wrote at least 3 books in a series, and people had read it and said they were good and I should try, so it's fine. So I sent out to one agent, and it didn't do so well. I sent out to another agent, and then I kind of asked her, how can I improve my query letter? And
I read the query letter.
And she read the query letter, and she didn't like it. She's very good at business, and she would, push me aside at that point. So let me try this. And so go ahead. How did you do?
Oh, so I did eventually get an agent. The agent shopped things around. Really didn't get that far. That agent had to leave the business because her husband was relapsing with leukemia. And so she suggested some small presses. So I took the book to 3 small presses, and one of them picked it up. And I think the smartest thing I did with that small press was manage the terms under which the rights would revert to us. And they were, they were like a lot of small presses. They were very well-intentioned, but very poorly financed. So we never made any money with the small press. But we did get the rights back to those. And once we did, that's when I started self-publishing the books. And once I had 5 of the books released, and it was a 6-book series, I thought, well, let's, maybe knock on New York's door one more time before we release the 6th book. And that's when myself and our foreign rights agent put a little packet together. We knocked on New York's door, and we got a much different reception than when we did, the first time it was being shopped around, because we had sales.
Yeah, I remember you guys were, Michael's books were up there in the fantasy top 100 there for, seemingly month after month.
Yep.
Did you have like all 5 or 6 of them ready before you started releasing them?
I actually wrote the entire series before the first one was released. Like I said, I didn't actually intend to, I would never suggest anyone do this if you've never been published before or even been self-published. I did it because I didn't want to publish them. I had gotten tired of that. I spent 20 years of my life writing it and getting nowhere. It was like a waste of time, but I really like writing, and my daughter was interested in, and my wife was interested. So I thought, well, I'll finish these books just as a hobby. And I think I had the first 5 done when we landed the deal with AMI.
AMI.
So I finished the last one in the final year before the first one was released. So I had the entire 6-book series finished before the first one came out. And yes, as you mentioned earlier, the AMI was not a very big publishing house. They're very small, and they sent me a cover of what they planned on doing, and I was not happy. So I did a painting and sent it back to them and said, you can have this for free if you just use it.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, yes, we'll do that. In fact, since we're doing these, you might as well just keep doing them. And so when it got to self-publishing, I just kept doing the covers myself.
Right. And our kind of release schedule, all 6 books are written. And I know things are a little bit different now, but when we were releasing, really we were doing 2 books a year, every April and every October. So just as interest in one book would start to decline, we had another one like on the horizon, and that's what kept us up in the numbers, pretty good for a good long period.
They were all done. We were just editing them, just going over and cleaning them.
And maybe we're slow, but it would take us that long it would take us almost every bit of the 6 months to get them done.
The real problem with it is once I did that, I found this huge benefit of when you're writing a book series, if you get to like book 5 and you think, oh, I could do this really great thing if I just change this one paragraph in book 2, but you can't if yours already published. But see, I didn't. So now I'm spoiled. So now I do that with all my books. I try to get them all done before I actually do, which is kind of bad because of contracts. They want to be able to edit the books, but by the time, I sign the contract, it's already done. So that whole section of the contract is erroneous.
Yeah, the actual 3rd series Michael wrote for Del Rey, Penguin Random House, he had all 6 of those books done before they were written. And his new series, which I'm sure is going to have to be self-published because we're in a position where I don't think we can take another traditional deal. That one's already had the audio rights sold for it. So he's, again, going to be writing all 3 of those books before we get anywhere close to recording the first one.
Yeah, that's something I've found recently. Since we're doing the rapid releases so often, it's beneficial for more reasons than one to have like 3 done at once. But I also have had the thing where you're working, I kind of world build as I go, and you think of something new when you're on book 3 that you want to change in book 1. So it is really nice to be able to do that.
I was thinking about like J.K. Rowling, and when she got to book 5 or something, it's like she had to have wanted to change something previously, but since it's on a shelf, it totally makes it hard.
Yeah, definitely. I saw on I think in your About page, it mentions that when you actually accepted the deal from Orbit, at that time you were like selling mid 5 figures a month, just like 10, 20,000 books a month or something. Was it hard for you to take that deal, or did you know right away, like you were just really excited to do that?
So when the Orbit deal came in, when the offer letter came, it was actually before Michael was selling really high. His highest months hit November, December, January, and February. Now I'm talking of 2010 and 2011. We got the deal in October of 2010. And at that time, he had like decent sales, but not like runaway sales. I think we were selling about 4,000 books a month across 5 titles. But there was a long time between the deal memo and the contract. And the contract was horrific.
Yeah, it was like 6 months or more.
Yeah, well, and the contract was horrific, and so it was taking me a very long time to negotiate it. So by the time we actually got everything narrowed down and we were going to put pen to paper, I ran some numbers, and I said, Michael, I think there's a pretty good chance that if you sign this contract with Orbit, we're going to lose about $200,000 to $250,000.
Okay.
And Michael said,
I said, well, if you can show me this store that I can go to where I can buy this kind of advertising that you would get from traditional publishing and be able to branch out and hit more readers, then I would do that. But I can't. So what I bet on this, and it really was a gamble, was that I'm going to invest that money that I could have made self-publishing back into my business and infuse it by way of traditional publishing, which I thought, I didn't know, total guess, that it would make my fan base grow larger. And it turned out that that actually did happen. I had many people who were just like going, I can't believe you would go with traditional deal since what you're making. But it did work. And the thing we didn't realize was that not only did my fan base triple at that point, but also it opened the doors for international translation rights, which really boosted. And literally I made at probably more than I would have had I stayed self-published.
The advances for the overseas was about double what the advance was for the U.S. Now we had had a few of the smaller countries when we were self-published, and we had contracts for those. But the really big countries, the Germany, France, Russia, where the really big money came in, we didn't have any offers for those as self-publishing. And I don't know, maybe these days it's common for self-publishers to get foreign sales.
And also, I don't think that we ever would have gone into audio, except that I think recorded books approached Orbit probably because it was published through Orbit. But we never thought there was much money in audio.
Yeah, that was stupid.
As it turned out, there is. So that was a surprise. So there were surprising benefits above and beyond just clout. I mean, there was really monetary values that we got out of it. But that said, I mean, at the same time, once you get a certain degree of awareness in the marketplace, I think you can make a lot more money, with those books if you're self-publishing as well. Yeah. That's why we're very dedicated to the hybrid model, where you put money into your brand by way of traditional publishing and other brands, but also you can get your equity out of it by essentially self-publishing and getting money directly off of those books.
Right.
Yeah. Hybrid certainly seems like it's the best of both worlds,
I think so. It provides you the ultimate flexibility,
Now, you talked about this a little bit, but like lots of authors, we're talking about this, even really relatively successful indie authors, a lot are still hoping for the traditional deal. And when that contract comes along, you were saying how you got your hands on a contract that was awful. How important is it to say run it by a lawyer to make sure there's nothing potentially damaging in the contract?
Well, unfortunately, the lawyer can't help you, and neither can the agent help you. The problem is, in Big Five traditional publishing, there are certain, I'm just going to put it out there, they walk lockstep. Now, is it actual collusion, or
before you get there, I mean, first of all, the lawyer and the agent can help you to make sure that you're not being purposely, screwed over in ways that other authors are not. They will find to make sure that what you're getting is standard, okay?
But standard
But she's saying that, but standard is not very good.
Right.
And most independent published authors will recognize that this is not a good thing.
Yeah. So I've talked to, I've called up, it was 5 or 6 of the biggest IP lawyers in New York. And I asked them if they could get movement on 3 particular aspects of the contract. Because if they could get movement on those aspects of the contract, then I would definitely hire them for their huge amounts of money, because it was worth it to me. The first was to get something other than life of copyright. And all of them said, no, can't do anything about that. I said, okay, so can we raise the threshold for which a book is considered in print such that it will revert? And they said, no, those are not something that's going to be budged on. And I said, well, how about the royalty rate? Nope, no movement on the royalty rate. Everyone's getting the same royalty rate. And then the other thing I asked about was the non-compete clause. And they're like, no, standard non-compete clause. But they don't enforce it, and it's illegal. So if they tried to enforce it, you could take them to court. And I was like, okay, so they can't move on those aspects of the contract that I would need moved. So that didn't help me out very much. We were certainly able to negotiate our contract to something that was signable. As first presented to us, it was completely not signable, because the non-compete clause would essentially handcuff Michael for the rest of his career. Unless we did try to take it to court, which, that's a dice roll of whether it would go our way or not. So we were able to defang certain clauses, and we were able to get certain concessions made to the contract, so it wasn't like, a career killer. But there is not a contract out there that I would say is good for the author, except for print-only contracts. Print-only contracts, definitely, because there's a very easy way to determine if something's in print or not, right? I mean, if they still have books in the warehouse, it's in print, and if they're not, then it's out of print. So in those types of contracts, I think they're better. And of course, they don't have the ebook and audio right. The biggest problem right now is, and I knew this when we went into the last contract negotiation, is that the Big Five has now declared audio rights to be a primary right. So if you are not willing to give up print, ebook, and audio, you just can't sign with any of the Big Five. And we're getting very, very, very high advances on our audio rights. And we get more on audio rights than Big Five publishers are paying us for print and ebook rights. So by far, like 3 times more.
It's financially impossible right now for me, for the most part, to go through a traditional publisher.
Yeah.
I mean, Penguin Random House can't pay me enough to offset
the audio.
what I'm getting handed through audio.
Yeah.
And if they're not willing to give up that right, I simply can't take it. It's just financially unsound.
Yeah. And when we sold the audio rights before the print and ebook rights, I knew there was a possibility it would close the door to traditional publishing. And it turned out I was right. But I knew that going in, so it wasn't a big deal.
So aside from contract negotiations, what drawback would most people be surprised to learn about with regards to being published traditionally?
So
surprised?
Surprised, dismayed, annoyed.
It depends on who we're talking to here, because I mean, most people who are knowledgeable and probably watching the show are most knowledgeable about being independently published and everything. They know most of the pitfalls, such as lack of control, inability to set your own title necessarily, the ability to do your own cover art. And those things I don't have too much trouble with, because I've actually had pretty good luck with all of my, Orbit not so much, but with the other ones I've done pretty well with cover and title. But the one thing that's kind of difficult is actually editors.
Yeah.
When editors are kind of difficult, I like to have an editor who knows me and who knows my style and doesn't rewrite my stuff that I purposely spent a lot of time like taking out certain words, and they go in and they put them back in, and just drives me insane. And they don't know that. So they hire people to edit my stuff, and I have to just come back and say, yeah, okay, get rid of that editor and give me a new editor, because they don't know crap. I'm just going to set everything. Yeah. So this is an issue that most people don't necessarily think of. It's weird, because I think most authors who haven't been traditionally published have it in their head that once they get published through a traditional author or a traditional publisher, they're now going to be like working for that publisher, and that publisher is going to tell them, you have to make these changes to your book or it won't be published. And that I've not found that to ever be the case.
That's not the case, yeah.
So you actually have a great deal more clout than you would think. I originally, when I had changes sent to me by Orbit, I was panicking. I had several pages of changes that they wanted to make to my series that had already been published and quite successful. And I knew the answers to all these questions, and I knew most of them were wrong. And I had to ask my agent. I said, this is a problem. What are we going to do about this? And she said, at the very beginning, it says these are suggestions. I said, yeah, but isn't that like publishing speak for do it or we cancel the deal? And they went, no, they actually mean that. I went, oh, okay, then I'm just going to like cancel all these. And I said, fine. So that is actually surprising, the amount that they are willing to work with you. But there's also a problem with that you can't necessarily have your own editor that goes with you from book to book.
I will say this. In particular, Penguin Random House, when we got the copy edits back from them, and I found the style of that particular editor wasn't meshing with Michael very well, in their defense, they put a new editor on, and an editor of my choice. I said, look, you work with Laura Georgestead. We've worked with Laura Georgestead in the past as self-publishing. We would like Laura Georgestead to edit this. And they said, fine. And they hired Laura Georgestead to do it. And for our last book with them, we actually asked them to hire the editor that we've used for self-publishing and have them, because we already knew that her style meshed with Michael's style.
And
they
this is
did.
the thing is that, I mean,
And they did.
a lot of writers don't know that you can hire the same editors that the publishers use.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the money's green to everybody, so they don't really care. And you can actually find, if you find out who they're working with, then you know who to contact, and you get the same quality.
Yeah, but so when we self-publish, we handpick the editors that we know. When we're with traditional publishing, we hope they're using a good editor that meshes well. And when they don't, so far they have addressed it, and they don't charge us for it or anything. They just put another editor on it. And I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, but to me, the biggest disadvantage with the traditional publishing is a lack of control of pricing. Michael's books that were put out through Orbit were published in 2011. They're still at $9.99, low these many years later. I've been trying to get them to reduce the price on those books, at least the first book, and they just don't. Now, in their defense, they'll say, well, it sells really good at this higher price and it makes us all more money. I'm like, oh, yeah, but it would probably sell even better at a lower price.
There's also the problem of flexibility of format. Like, we would like to have hardcovers come out from my books. We can't do that because we don't own the rights to that anymore. So there's certain things there where you can't do book sets necessarily.
We've just bought the rights back to the hardcovers.
Well, I know. I was saying the effort you've been going through to get that has been astronomical. But you can't do a lot of the things that you would like to do in a marketing sense that you probably know better than publishers. One of the things I was surprised at is publishers aren't that knowledgeable. They're not knowledgeable in the way that most people assume they are. There's this assumption that they've been doing this business for hundreds of years. They're tried and true. They know everything. They're on the cutting edge because they're constant. This is what they do for a living. And it turns out that self-published authors are actually far more knowledgeable about what's happening right now.
For marketing, for sure.
And we actually had to educate several of the people we worked with, who I thought it would be the other way around, but it turned out that Robin actually had greater knowledge on most of the subject of how to promote and how to work Amazon and how to do algorithms and all those kinds of things that she was an expert at.
Metadata. Yeah. We have a lot of problems teaching the publishers what categories to put the books in.
So the surprise, or rather not so much surprise, but the thing that you should be aware of if you do work with a traditional publisher, is that they are people you have to educate and teach and stay on as if they were your employee, and they're a new employee, and you have to really stay with them and work with them in order to make you have to work together, but you have to make sure that they do what they can to promote you. They're not going to necessarily know how to do it. It's not like they don't want to necessarily, but they won't know how, and they certainly won't expect you to know, what they don't. So these are things that you have to work on.
Have you ever wondered if the publishers have you marked as difficult to work with?
Oh, we have no idea. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. There was one time, for sure, where non-competes are my big thing. I am on a mission to get non-competes gone. I mean, this is also an initiative of the Authors Guild, so I'm not the only one who's doing this, obviously. But I was on some forum and I was talking about non-competes and how terrible they are and why you have to watch out for them and this, that, and the other thing. And we got an email from Michael's agent, who was told by Michael's publisher to tell Robin to shut up. And not only did they say Robin needs to shut up, but they need to say that Robin is violating her contract because she can't talk about these things publicly. Well, they don't know what's in their contract, and I do. There is no NDA in my contract. And my response was, if you want Robin to stop saying things about your contract, then stop making such crappy contracts. I mean, you put the stuff in there. I'm just telling the rest of the world what it is and what it means. And
Robin, are you looking for more clients?
and the interesting thing about that is I had to chastise my agent, because I said, when the publisher calls you and tells you this, your response is not to give me a call or an email. Your response is to say, no, I'm not going to relay that message to Robin. Robin is doing what she feels is right doing. And if you wouldn't write such stupid contracts, you wouldn't be talking about your stupid contracts. So yeah, I don't know if we're considered, well, if I'm, see, Michael's not involved in any of this. That's the beauty of our relationship is.
She's actually my agent.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. She's the one who gets between me and the publisher, because if I had to work directly with the publisher, I wouldn't be traditionally published.
Like I said, are you looking for new clients? Just say the word. We'll put the links in the show notes.
I think that I think people would say that I am definitely well educated, and B, very protective of Michael and his work. So when we're under a contract negotiation right now. It was kind of funny because it's with a particular, this has never happened with us in a publishing contract before. In all of Michael's publishing contracts, the number one thing I do is make sure that Michael has the final say in content of the book, period, end of discussion. And that's never been a problem in any of the contracts so far. But with the new company, it did come up, and I started scratching all these various aspects out of the contract. And they're like, no, we can't scratch these because then we don't have control over the book. And I said, well, you're absolutely right. You don't have control over the book. Michael has control over the book. And they said, well, what if we don't, what if he doesn't implement the changes we request? I says, well, your recourse in that case is to not publish the book. And we will be more than happy to give you back any advance that you had provided, but you can't publish it. And that was, they said, in 47 years of publishing, we've never had that. And I'm like, well, if you want to publish Michael, that's the number one requirement. That's not a negotiable point. And they have they've agreed to it, and they're making sure that the agent that we're working with, one of the things that the general counsel said in the meeting is this. Now you realize that this is just for Michael's contract, and the other contracts you do with us will not have this language in it. And our agent said, yes, we agree, but so I don't know. Maybe I am hard to deal with.
But she's the nice one.
I am the nice one. When our agent told us we could not get the non-compete changed, period, end of discussion, I said, well, okay, well then we're not going to be published. And she said, oh, well, that's a good position to take, and I'll try and leverage that. I said, no, this isn't a threat. This is a fact. And I argued with her back and forth about this like for forever. And finally, I think I upset Mike because my voice was getting raised. And Michael walks downstairs and says, you tell her that you're the good cop. And
because she was asking to talk to me. Yeah,
she's like, I want to talk to Michael. And I was like, you can talk to him, but you won't like what you hear.
Because literally what I was going to tell her is that, I said, if I get on the phone, I'm going to tell her to give me the direct line to the editor who I'm negotiating with, and I'm going to tell them the deal is off. They're either going to do what I want or I'm gone. Yeah. Because I don't negotiate. She negotiates. That's why I have her.
Yeah. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Well, the great thing is when you're self-published and you've been successful at being self-published, you're not at the mercy of a publishing house. I mean, if they won't publish you under the terms that you want to be, fine. Yeah. You can go self-publish. Yeah. Nothing's going to stop you. Yeah. And that's always been a really great thing to fall back on. And now that we've actually established that we can do hardcover releases, we can do Kickstarters, we can raise money for it, we can get essentially what is an advance that you would get if you're going through a traditional publisher. Not that we need it anymore, but it helps when you're doing things like hardcovers. When you can do that, and you can do it at the same exact, and I would suggest at a higher quality than what publishers are putting out.
And a lot less hassles.
I mean, it's very appealing.
Yeah.
So there's no reason not to do that. So you're in an even footing with the publisher at that point. And if they offer you something you can't get someplace else, then you take it. Yeah. If they can't, then you don't. Yeah. And it's an equal meeting of minds. It's not a matter of where most authors think that, the publisher made them, or the publisher, they owe the publisher. And at that point, they must bend over backwards and do what the publisher wants. That's not true, at least not in my case. Now, everyone might say, well, you're doing really well right now and you have that kind of clout and you can do this kind of thing. But I didn't when I started.
Right.
What I did have was I was independently published and I was making enough money where I could walk away from a deal. And that, I think, made all the difference.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, nowadays, I think the biggest problem for traditional publishers is they can't get anywhere near what the self-publishing is making on their own. So, I mean, they can't make a competitive offer for a lot of people.
We're not letting them talk at all.
Sorry.
No, it's great to hear you guys. And I for those who aren't as familiar with the contracts and like what the non-compete means, could you explain how important that is, especially if you want to keep self-publishing while you're traditionally publishing?
Yeah. So there's a couple of places where it comes into play. The non-compete, if you look at the non-compete as it originally arrived to us, it literally said, now you got to keep in mind that this is a contract whose term is life of copyright, which means 70 years after the author's death. And the non-compete said something along the lines of, during the term of this contract, the author shall not, nor allow others to, publish a book that may injure the sales of this book. So for the rest of Michael's life, so what does that mean? What would injure the sales? If he does a different fantasy book in another world, will that injure the sales? Possibly. People are going to buy that book. If he wants to
particularly when they interpret it as being, if I were to come out with a self-published book on a different topic, they would still consider it to be competing and therefore hurting sales.
Right.
So it could be interpreted that anything that I produce might take sales away from the book that they published.
Right.
Which is why they could literally prevent me from writing anything from that point on.
Which is 100% illegal. All the contracts are generally governed by the laws of New York. New York is a right-to-work state. A non-competing agreement has to be limited in scope and limited in time. 70 years after the author's death is way too long to be limited in time.
Usually it's like a year or two.
Yeah. And worldwide is way too small as far as limit of scope. The way we got around that is we finally came down to like our bottom line, which is we said that within a very small window, a period of a couple of months before the release of the book and a month after the release of the book, Michael will not put out any other books during that small window, so they could have a window of exclusivity.
Which makes sense, because they don't want to be doing advertising for their book and then you have something else come out which can steal the thunder. So there's a certain reasonable aspect.
Yeah. And then we defined very clearly what was considered a competing book. And the language we got basically said, a competing book would be a book that had 80% of the same words as this book, in the same order, which of course is ridiculous, but it satisfied their need to have the non-compete in there. And even though it didn't mean anything, because it was essentially what you were getting in clause 1, which was saying you get the rights to this book. And we said, yes, we agree. We will not publish that exact same book ourselves or give another publisher that exact same book, which is pretty much defined right from the get-go. But it satisfied their need to have something in the contract that was related to non-compete.
I get the impression that corporation level requires certain things to be in a contract. So they have to be there in some form, but they can make changes to that as long as it stays in a clause, because probably changing that would be huge because it'd have to go through many levels of the corporation. They don't want to go to that hassle. So it's not a matter that they necessarily want it there. They just can't take it out, so they have to rearrange it a little bit.
So what we essentially did was defang the non-compete. The other area that particularly self-published authors have to pay attention to is something that's being very sneakily added into contracts. And it's being added into something called the Indemnification Clause. Now, the Indemnification Clause is the part of the contract where usually your eyes glass over and you stop reading. It basically says, I, the author, attest that this is a work written by me and I didn't steal this work from anyone else. And no one can say that I did it from anyone else. And if someone says that they did, we'll go to court and we'll fight it and blah, 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 blah. But what I've seen on multiple contracts is in that Indemnification Clause, it says, I, Michael Sullivan, attest that this book was written by me and nobody else, and it will be the next book released by me. Well, the next book released by me, when you combine that with a clause that says, after acceptance of the book, the publisher will have up to 2 years to release the book, means that it's quite possible that you could not release any other book for up to 2 years. Now, generally, the publisher will not take that whole 2 years. They'll take somewhere between 9 and 12 months, but even 9 and 12 months is a long time to be saying that you're not going to publish anything else.
And then there's the problem of the limbo clause.
Oh, the limbo clause. So the limbo aspect, which every agent I've ever had has missed this completely, and I've had to get the language changed. The sole remedy a author has to cancel a contract is if the book is not released after 2 years. If the book is released after 2 years, the author can say, I get the rights back. That's the only way that they can essentially terminate the contract. But it's 2 years after acceptance of the book, okay? So my question is, what if the book doesn't get to acceptance? If you read the contract, it talks about how you go through the editing and how you get to acceptance. And there's some language that says, you know, if the author and publisher can't agree after X iterations in this many days, the publisher may terminate the contract. But what if they don't? If they don't terminate the contract, therefore you never get to acceptance.
So what would happen is, let's say I had a disagreement with my publisher and I didn't want to make a certain change to the book, and they did.
They can't release it without you because...
So they could simply say, well, we can't come to an agreement here.
So we won't accept it.
But what they can also say is, but we have the power to prevent you from not only ever releasing this book, but ever releasing any books.
No.
Yes, because if that's my next book that I have to release, and it's still under contract,
oh yeah,
then they literally could prevent me from releasing any more books, which is a lot of clout when you're trying to get someone to make a change. And eventually the author says, all right, well, faced with that, sure, I'll make the change. So these are the little things that when you think about how they could add up, and when you're making a contract, you always have to think of worst case scenario, because sometimes that happens.
Yeah, so in my contracts, if the author and editor can't agree, they must terminate the contract. It's not they could terminate the contract, they must. And that gets rid of the limbo state.
All right. Yes, no, it's good to know. Because I think, like you were saying, there are a lot of benefits to maybe traditionally publishing a series.
There is.
To get a bigger fan base and have your books out in the bookstore and maybe attract new people to your self-published stuff. But definitely, it sounds like you really need to be careful and make sure you're not getting yourself stuck.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's in all aspects. I mean, even in self-publishing, you got to make sure that you get the right cover art. You got to make sure you get a good editor, and you got to make sure that people aren't taking advantage of you. If you hire someone to do advertising, there's a lot of people out there who are like to prey on authors who don't know what they're doing. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to watch out for. It's a minefield when you're an author, because you have a dream, and a lot of authors will do just about anything to achieve that dream. And there are people out there who know that, and they will come after you.
Yeah, we were on a cruise in Europe in the summer, and I happened to meet a person who had self-published. They had not self-published well, and they said, "I'll tell you how committed I am to this book. I have invested $50,000 of my own money in this book so far." And I'm like,
on what?
I'm like, what could you possibly spend $50,000 on? Obviously, they did not make good choices in how
So
they
what
went
did they
about
put
it.
it in?
PR people. I don't even know all the stuff, but I was like, well, probably their editor. I think they spent $10,000 editing the book. Now we use the same editors that the publishers use, and I pay about $1,200 for a 120,000 word book.
Yeah.
So they paid 10 times that. For a very short book. It was only a 70,000 word book.
Definitely need to be watching out. But I know we're all curious about your Kickstarters because you've had tremendous success with that. So I'm going to bring you around to that. And
Okay.
I think your first one was because the publisher wasn't interested. You wanted to do
Nope.
like a dystopian, or?
No. So we had a really good offer on Hollow World from a traditional publisher, but I thought we would make more money on our own. The first Kickstarter we ever did was actually an experiment to prove to some traditionally published authors that they could self-publish. We knew several traditionally published authors who put entire series in the drawer because the advances they were being offered was not great enough for them to sign the contracts.
And there were a few that actually had published like the first or second book, but they weren't going to pick up the third book under other contracts.
Right.
It wasn't doing well, but they had readers.
Right. And they said, so I said, well, why don't you self-publish? And they said, well, I can't afford to self-publish. I can't afford to pay the editors. I can't afford to do the cover designers. I said, well, why don't you run a Kickstarter? You have a fan base, run a Kickstarter, pay for those things, and then you can self-publish. And they said, no, that will never work. So my first Kickstarter really existed for, to prove that it could work. And I think we were asking for, I can't remember, $3,000 maybe? And I think we got
I think you thought it would take,
$30,000.
what was it?
Well, it would take like $7,000 when I added up everything.
Right, and we were going to put like half in, then we're going to hope to make the other half in
Right.
Kickstarting, and then we'd have the money to pay for it.
Right. And what we found was the Kickstarter was such a, it was such a great experience because we had all these people who were very excited about helping to bring the product into life. And so they were telling people about it, and they were getting the book before everyone else was. So the book had a lot of pre-release buzz. And it was just this really cool kind of democratization of art. Everyone was really thrilled about it.
It was like when I traditionally published, there were these unexpected benefits that I didn't see. And in Kickstarter, we had the same thing, these unexpected benefits of if you're independently published and you're doing reasonably well, you understand that there are people who really like your books and they promote it for you. And then there's people who become super cheerleaders who make it their life's work to promote your work. And these are just the most valuable things you can find. Well, when you go through Kickstarter, these are people who invested in you and feel that they helped you make this, make this dream come true. And they are part of it. So yes, a lot of them, particularly if they like the book, will go out of their way to promote you. So you have this army of people who are out there marketing for you.
Yeah.
And that was not something we expected.
And we got a whole new audience because there are people in the Kickstarter community who are just looking for projects.
Never heard of me before, had no idea who I was, because it was a completely different echo chamber as composed to what we're used to over in the independent writing area.
So we got a lot of new people through that, and because the Kickstarter ran very well, they became very supportive. So that was the first Kickstarter. The second Kickstarter came about because, as you guys know, most self-publishing, you have to do print on demand. And that works reasonably well for trade paperbacks, although the unit costs are pretty high. And it doesn't work very well at all in hardcover just because, again, the print on demand costs are rather high for that. The reason why we parted with Orbit was when Michael was doing the next series, The Legends of the First Empire books, my kind of line in the sand was I wanted to move Michael from trade paperback to hardcover. And so I went to Orbit and I said, that's the condition of this series. And they said, no, we don't think it's time to move Michael. We think trade paperback is where he does well. We're going to keep him in trade paperback. So that's why we went and shopped the books around, and everyone else we shopped it to said, well, of course we'll put it in hardcover. I don't know what Orbit is thinking. But once I started shifting over to hardcover, there was still some more Ryera books that were coming out, and I wanted to make sure that those were in hardcover. So in order to do that, I wanted to do a press run. And I did something very interesting in my press run. I did the interiors of the books. I did 10,600 copies where all the interiors were exactly the same. But then I bound them differently. I took 5,000 of them and bound them as paperbacks. And another 5,000 I bounded as regular hardcovers with a rainbow board. And then I took 500, 500? Yes, 500, and I made those linen copies with a special dust cover, gold stamping, and I made those limited editions. And I made 100 of them rare editions where I bound them in faux leather with a slip case. And they were and so in the Kickstarter, there were these various levels. People could spend $15 for the trade paperback, or $25 for the hardcover, or $50 for the limited edition, or $100 for the rare. And when you add up that print run and the warehousing cost and the shipping and everything, it's quite a bit of money. You know, it's $20,000 to $30,000 to do that type of a run. And although, and that was just more money than I was willing to go out on a limb with, you know, for this experiment that I didn't know whether it would work or not. So I said, hey, you know, let's put it out there as a Kickstarter. And so the second Kickstarter ran, And I think we made about $73,000 on that Kickstarter. And then we used something called Backer Kit, which is a way for people to add on to their order after the Kickstarter. And we raised about another $15,000 in the Backer Kit. So the whole thing came out to be about $92,000 when everything was said and done.
But I think a lot of people get a misconception of what Kickstarter is. And for a writer, it literally is you getting an advance. People are paying in advance for the book they'll get later. It's not, a lot of people have this idea that they're just investing money in your company or something and they won't get anything from it. They're literally buying the book now and receiving it later.
Yeah, they're just
it's the same exact system that a traditional publisher does.
Yeah.
They give you money and then they pay you back when you sell the book. Same exact system. So it's not like a lot of people think it's charity or something. How dare you ask people to give you money? No, they're buying in advance.
And the thing about a Kickstarter is there always is a reward, a physical thing that you're selling, you know. So that's what we did for our second Kickstarter. And our third Kickstarter, we basically repeated the second Kickstarter as far as doing a print run for that book. And that one, so both the second Kickstarter and the third Kickstarter were like the number 2 most funded fiction Kickstarter of all time. Now a couple of other ones have come in so that the second one is now like down at number 6. But
I think this drives her crazy.
But the first one is still at number 2.
She doesn't like seeing her ranking drop.
Well, it's been 2.5 years. You think there's nobody else came through?
She's not competitive at all.
No, not at all. So for the latest Kickstarter, when all is said and done, one other thing that I should mention about that particular Kickstarter. Back to contracts, non-compete clauses. For Michael's Legends of the First Empire series, we could not release any books based in the world of Elan until until all those books were released. That was not a good non-compete. It was not. And our agent really screwed it up incredibly badly. But the advance on that particular series was so high. And since the non-compete was only going to last for 3 years, as opposed to lasting for the rest of Michael's career, I was like, okay, I'll just bite my inside of my mouth for a couple of years and we can do this contract. But what I ended up doing was something I thought was really quite ingenious, is I told Del Rey that I would like to put out another Rhaenyra book. Now, I know there's a non-compete, and I have to ask your permission first, so I'm asking your permission. But here's what I'm doing for you. I promise that I will not put this book into the retail chain. There will be no ebook available in the retail chain. There will be no hardcover in the retail chain or paperback in the retail chain until after Age of War is released. But I will run a Kickstarter, and I will sell the book directly from my website until after Age of War came out, and then we'll put it out there. Is that okay with you? And they said, yeah, that's fine. And so the really nice thing is, because the book is not in the retail chain right now, and because people have to buy it directly from us, we're getting, we don't have to pay the retailer portion, right? We don't have to give the 30% that would normally happen in the ebook, and we don't have to give the 55% that would normally be done in a print book to the retailers. So we're actually making very large margins on those sales.
And because the contract with Del Rey doesn't cover audiobook, it came out in audio.
Yes.
And audio is doing very well, and that's helping to promote the book.
Yes.
In ways that you wouldn't, because we don't have an Amazon, so it's promoting it that way. So yeah, she's working night and day to ship books now.
Yeah.
But I guess it's a good thing.
Well, yeah, because, on a $25 paperback, which is a reasonable price, on a $25 hardcover, we make about $22.50 on that sale. So she does editing, she does my marketing, she does my agenting, she does contracts, and she ships the books. Okay. Well, during the Kickstarter, Sarah helped me.
That's true.
Yeah, because it's hard to ship all those books. So our daughter
just tell us where her website is so we can go ahead and sign up and
I'm scared someone's going to come kidnap her.
They'd have to find me first. We live in the middle of nowhere.
Now.
All right. So still on subject of Kickstarter. the cost of, as you've mentioned, the cost of self-publishing a book is actually very low. Like you can get it, like if you have your editor lined up and your cover art lined up, we're talking about $3,000 is not unreasonable to have a very professional release.
Great.
Do you think that Kickstarter, even if you can afford to release your book just out of your own coffers, is it still worth kickstarting it just for the things like you mentioned, the additional audience you get from people just cruising Kickstarter and the buzz?
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the huge benefits of Kickstarter, in fact, in many cases, we do it mostly for the advertising because it brings an awareness to the book, because it's like the idea of putting out ARCs, right? I mean, people put out advanced reading copies to different people to generate a buzz. Well, you do this to Kickstarter, all those people read your books in advance and they generate a buzz. Now, my book is still, when she's talking about Winter's Daughter, still has not actually been released yet. But there's a lot of buzz about it, people talking about it because they already read it.
So Winter's Daughter will, unfortunately, it's now being released in October because Age of War got delayed.
Right.
Originally, Age of War was supposed to come out in April, and we were going to release Winter's Daughter in June. But now Age of War is coming out in July, and so now we're going to be putting it out in October. So that book has only been sold through us and Audible. And we have nearly 20,000 units out in the world of people already reading it, already putting Goodreads reviews on, already talking about the book. And, that's going to be, we have 20,000 people running around for a period of like 10 months talking about the book. And then it's going to hit the retail chain. So the number of reviews are already going to be very high on it. The Goodreads reviews are going to be very high on it, so it's going to hit the ground, running when it finally does start.
Which isn't quite as big a deal for independents, because you're not really trying to do like they do in traditional, making the first. Because when you're traditionally published, the first day the book drops is like the most important day, and everything after that kind of down.
These are people who understand the Amazon algorithm.
Really?
And so for them, working the algorithm is very important. So although you don't know about the algorithms, they do.
Do people pay money for books?
The early release is an important time to any book. Self-published because of the algorithms, and traditionally published because of
that was not my experience, because in tradition, when we were self-published, it didn't care what you made the first day. Or the next day, or the next day. My books didn't sell for 3 years.
No, but by the time you got the 5th book out,
right,
that's what got you on the Amazon Top 100 authors.
Right, but being independently published, you can wait all that time. If you're traditionally published and you wait 3 years, your books aren't going to be at the bookstore anymore.
That's true.
Yeah. We've also learned not to speak ill of the almighty Amazon.
Yes, absolutely.
But, okay, so my question, I've also wondered about Kickstarter campaigns. Your latest campaign garnered over 80,000. Obviously, that's not quite the amount you were looking for. So what happens? I mean, are you trying to get as much as possible? I mean, are there any drawbacks for getting way more than you originally wanted?
Yeah. So I have had to pour cold water on both my last 2 Kickstarters. And what I mean by cold water, I mean not actively market them. Because once I raised the money that was required to get the hardcovers run, I'm trying to cool the sales because the shipping gets pretty horrific. We had to ship 1,425 packages out, and that's a lot of packages. Now, I should mention, the plan was to use a fulfillment house, okay? You ship the books to the fulfillment house, they collate it, they send it out. Great. The problem was timing. When this book was finishing up, it was right in mid-December. And by the time the book came off the press, the fulfillment house did not have the bandwidth to do it themselves. And Christmas was coming. And I knew that people wanted the books for Christmas. So I could have kept the plan and done everything through a fulfillment house, but that meant things would start shipping in middle January rather than middle December. And I just did not think that was a responsible thing to do to Michael's fans, many of which bought these things for Christmas. So we shifted our plans. We had 8,000 books delivered in the cold of night into a parking lot near a storage warehouse, and me and my daughter, and well, not me, Michael and my daughter moved them box by box off of pallets into the storage facility. And then me and my daughter spent a week just shipping books, you know. So if the things to the fulfillment house would have gone, it would have been much, much easier. What I learned is in the second Kickstarter, the first Kickstarter wasn't that many books, so that was easy. The second Kickstarter, I made the mistake of allowing people to get dedicated books, and a fulfillment house can't marry a book that's signed to John to a mailing label to John. I mean, they just want all generic books. So for the third Kickstarter, people could have the books signed, but they could only have them signed. They couldn't have them signed and dedicated. Because if the books are just signed, then the fulfillment house can do them because all the books are exactly the same. They just have to print out the labels, stick a book in a box, and send it. But like I said, the timing didn't work on the fulfillment house, so we ended up shipping them ourselves. It was pretty crazy if you saw like all the books stacked up in the house, and Michael signing them, and then us taking them to the garage and putting them in boxes. It was, yes. I think Sarah and I slept like 3 hours a night for like 4 or 5 days straight.
That was a hectic week.
It was. So yes, you sometimes, you know, if you're getting a lot of orders, you sometimes have to try and cool them for that because it just gets hard to fulfill.
Yeah, I did a Kickstarter early on to fund the audiobooks for my first series, and I offered signed dedicated paperbacks, and even though I was on a much smaller scale, it was enough that I haven't been back to Kickstarter just because it was a lot of work to
well, especially when you're trying to marry those up, you know. That when me and Sarah did the 1,400 books in the 1,400 packages in the course of like 4 days, you know, we knew they were coming, so we had all the packing slips, you know, like printed out beforehand, and you know, we had all our boxes and everything, so we could go through them pretty quickly. But when you have to marry them up, when you have to marry, you know, like if you gave Mike a list of 100 names to sign, and then you had to go through them and find, you know, where's John to go with this John's envelope, you know, that's really hard.
It's hard enough to just figure out what book it goes to what person, because they're not always the same. Yeah,
because there's hardcovers, and there were the limited editions, and sometimes people got, you know, 2 hardcovers and a limited edition.
And I suspect that a lot of people don't actually realize that it's just her, me, and sometimes my daughter, and that's all who's doing all this production.
Our team.
That's our team. Yes, we don't have like, you know, I don't have interns here or anything like that. It's just 3 of us, and we're getting old now.
And we're old.
We're having trouble carrying, you know, what was it? How many tons of books?
Well, for the second Kickstarter, I myself moved 3,500 pounds of books.
Yeah,
so over 2 tons, you know, almost 2 tons, over a ton and a half of books.
So you know, this is why I became an author, so I didn't have to do that.
But the people love the Kickstarter.
That's true.
They really do love it. I mean, they get so excited and so thrilled, and they talk about it, and they love it when they hit a new stretch goal and they get a new something in the Kickstarter. I mean, the Kickstarters, they're just really fun times.
And it gives you another way to promote your book, which is always good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've been chatting for about an hour here. Do you mind if we ask you a couple questions on the marketing side before we let you go?
Sure.
Well, why don't I just ask you, what all are you doing for marketing? Are you checking out every new thing, or do you just kind of have a plan you've had for years and you're sticking to it?
Things have changed a lot in our marketing. I guess the first thing I should say is we've never spent much money on marketing. I mean, we've done, I think, maybe 2 book bubs, and that's like our biggest like marketing expense. We don't do Facebook ads. We don't do Amazon ads. We don't do we don't pay for advertising in general. What we do, or at least what we did early on, is a lot of grassroots, what I'll call elbow grease marketing. A lot of connecting with people on Goodreads. Goodreads is a huge aspect of Michael's fan base. Michael is very much an unknown for the reading world in general, but like on Goodreads, he's like the 38th most followed author in the world. which is just kind of crazy when you think about that, because it's not really that well known.
I'm not that interested, really.
So a lot of Goodreads. Initially, we spent a lot of time with book bloggers. Any book blogger that would take a self-published book, we would send them blog, stuff. We would write blogs for people. I would organize book tours for online book tours, not store book tours. So a lot of our marketing was really kind of grassrootsy and building the mail list. Although I must say that we have this fabulous mail list, and unfortunately I hardly ever use it, because every time I want to use it, it's usually when I'm trying to cool something like a Kickstarter. So instead of like mailing people to Kickstarter, I'm kind of keeping my mail list to myself. So, for us, I think the most important thing we do is we keep releasing books. We do not release.
We don't release them that fast.
We don't release the way you release books, but we constantly do have new books coming out. We do giveaways on Goodreads. We do.
Well, you're active on Goodreads. You're active on. We do stuff on
Reddit.
We did
a lot of AMAs on
Amazing
Reddit.
Stories. We did stuff there.
Yeah.
And I wrote. I don't know. I'm sure everyone here's familiar with Goodreads, and they have you can ask the author questions, and you can post there, and there's a lot of things along those lines. And then of course, we have the thing where if you did a post here, it gets picked up and sent over to Twitter, so that it spreads around. But mostly it's just social networking.
Yeah.
There's not much else.
It's really, I think these days, I think the traditional publishing is kind of growing the market for the books. So primarily what we're doing is keeping the readers happy. A lot of direct communication with them, keeping them up to date with where we are with the various books. When something goes into editing, when something comes out of editing.
The thing I hear most often is people will write emails to me and I'll respond and they'll say, "Oh my God, you wrote back and quickly. This is so amazing that there's an author who can actually write back."
Sometimes more quickly than others.
True, that's true.
It
slipped through the cracks.
It's embarrassing when you come across an email. It's Michael, this email's been sitting here for 2 months.
2 months. I found from a year ago.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And we would write back and they go, and we say, "Really sorry for the delay." I didn't think you'd write back at all. Sorry.
Yeah, we try to keep.
And I had someone actually write on, I think it was a Twitter, saying something they literally wrote, "The great thing about Michael Sullivan is that he responds to every single thing that's ever written to him." And I wrote back, I said, "You now."
All right. So I guess my only question, we've sort of covered any of the other questions I have, but you talk about all the marketing that you're doing. Has traditional publishing gotten in the way of anything that you would have liked to do?
No. I mean, the way we treat traditional publishing is so first of all, what I should say is if you get kind of a standard traditional publishing deal, by standard, I mean a $5,000 to $10,000 advance, the amount of advertising they're going to do for you is very little. I mean, they'll have a few ARCs for you. They'll put you in their catalog. They might talk to the book buyers a little bit. Now for Michael, his advances are much higher, and they actually do rather large marketing campaigns. They buy, Goodreads ads at $5,000 a pop. They'll spend $7,500 renting the Goodreads email addresses to send messages to. So they will actually put money into it. But I treat all of those things as kind of like the gravy. I consider that to be icing. I don't change our marketing at all based off of what the publisher does.
Well, I kind of think of it, for me, traditional publishing is another way of publishing a book. You can go through audio or recorded books for audiobooks. You can go through Amazon for publishing. You can go through iBooks. You can do many different ways of getting your book out there. Traditional publishing is another one of those. So it's just another venue that you can use, and you use it for different books. Now, I wanted to have the series of books that I have right now coming out through Penguin, Random House, and I literally wanted them to put a book out every year. I intended to have that happen because while they're producing those books and advertising, I'm going to be writing and releasing self-published books.
In between them.
In between. And the idea was to have them marketing my name while I'm also producing self-published books. And if you figure out, in my mind, those are the books I wanted to be hitting traditional, where I have other books which are already got great legs. They're already well known. I don't need to push them too much. So those can go out in self-publishing. It's all strategy of what you think works best. What will work best in audio, what will work best in self-publishing, what will work best in traditional, and what will work best in small traditional publishing. And all of those things they're just different ways, and it depends on what you're producing and how you want to get it out there. It's not that I'm going to go traditional and that's all I'm going to do, because I've devoted now my life to that. It's not. It's just those are just different tools that an author can use now. It's not a matter of the author has to be controlled by other people. You just sit and say, okay, these books, I want to go over there because that'll work best for me. These books go over here because that's not going to work best for me. They're tools for an author.
But the publishers have never said to us, like, don't do this, publish, marketing wise, or do that. The only thing that we have to do is like kind of coordinate things, because like the ARCs for Age of War arrived at the door a little while ago. So I was going to do a Goodreads giveaway. So I went to go do a Goodreads giveaway, and I found out there already was a Goodreads giveaway because the publisher had done it. So I said, fine. I just chose some dates that weren't corresponding to the publisher's one, and now we're doing 2 Goodreads giveaways. So, sometimes I just find out different publishers are better than others. I mean, I think Del Rey is great.
Yeah.
We've had no complaints with Del Rey at all.
Absolutely.
And in fact, we do a lot of this managing from below. So like when Age of Swords was getting close to be coming up, I reached out to my publisher and I said, it would be really great if you guys could temporarily lower the price on Age of Myth, book 1. And she's like, yeah, we've already got that scheduled to run for 3 weeks from this date to this date. And I'm like, oh, cool. I do that same thing with Orbit. And they say no. But, so yeah, they do a lot of great stuff, and they've never told us not to do stuff. And what I always tell authors is don't think that don't relinquish your marketing to the publisher, thinking that you don't have to market because you have a publisher. You still have to do all the things you normally would do. And if they do some other things,
they're
great.
doing more. They didn't used to, but they're starting to do more now. I mean, it used to be they didn't do hardly any advertising, but now at least they're starting to work on it.
Because in the old days, the publisher's customer was not the book buyer, it was the corporate book buyer.
Bookstore.
The bookstore buyers. They didn't care about readers. They were marketing towards the retail chain. That was who they were focused on.
All right. So my last question for you guys, now that you've clearly been doing this for a good long while, if you could do things over again, is there anything you would do differently?
So this question's been asked me many times, and I've always said no, except for now I have something.
I was going to go
Hit us with your best shot.
I would be an astronaut.
So the only misstep I think we made, and we didn't, and there was no way of knowing this, was to not make audio a non-starter. On our first contract, we had to give the audio rights to Orbit. And on our second contract, we also had to give the audio rights to Orbit. Our agent just could not divorce those.
But we also didn't fight for it because we really didn't think audio was any good.
We did not, well, and I'll give you some examples. So when the audio rights were first purchased for the Rhaenyra stories, they had an advance of like $2,000 a book. So and we had to split that money 50-50 with the publisher. So I'm like, okay, so I gave up $1,000. What do I care? It's like no big deal, right? But it still irked me that they were getting half the money for doing nothing more than signing a piece of paper. And if the audio had only made $1,000, that would have been okay. Now, to date, the audio portion of those books has brought in about $280,000. So $140,000 of that has gone to Orbit for signing a piece of paper, and $140,000 of that came to us. But now those contracts are about to run out, and so they're being renewed. And to renew that contract, the audio producer is now paying an advance to Orbit of $400,000, $200,000 of which goes to Orbit, and $200,000 of which comes to us. So if we hadn't attached those audio rights as part of that original deal, I would be a much happier camper right now, because it like burns my britches that Orbit is getting half of all that money for literally, maybe 2 hours of work while they negotiated and signed a contract. It just.
But we had no idea that. I mean, because at that time there was very few people buying audio books.
Right.
They were buying them, those big thick CD cases for like $50, $60, and they weren't that popular until they came out with the idea of streaming.
Yeah, and if I could tell your audience like one thing, seriously shop around your audio rights. Audible Studios, Recorded Books, Podium Publishing, they are snatching up audio rights left and right, and the advances on them are incredibly profitable. I know many, many, many authors who are getting $100,000 advances for single books. And I can tell you we've had only one 7-figure contract, and it's for audiobooks for a trilogy. So the money in that particular area is huge right now.
Yeah, we consider right now, it's like audio right now is what ebooks was, 5-6 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, what audiobooks, what ebooks were in 2010, 2011, audiobooks are now.
Yeah.
And there are some audio producers who have no advance audios with some higher royalties. That may certainly be a way to go. But I'm telling you, the advances these days are.
Yeah, we seem to have found that the audio companies are more willing to work with authors.
Oh,
they're more
so
cutting
good.
edge. They're more in tune with, I think, with independent writers. They're not, because they're new. They've never existed that much before. I mean, they've been around for a long time, but only now have they got this new model, and I think they're being aggressive. They're being like Amazon is.
We love our audio publishers.
Yeah.
Love them to death. All of them. Yeah. The only thing that's bad is we can't give them all, we can't.
Yeah, I know. It's obnoxious because we like them both. They've both done great things twice, but they fight each other. It's like,
they both want the book, but only one can win.
yeah, so because I don't want to hurt either one's feelings, because they've both done really well by me. And I'm like, I guess it could have worse problems.
Yeah.
Now, has your success with the audiobooks got you at all tempted to produce them on your own and keep all the profits? No.
No, because here's the thing, right? So first of all, the royalty difference is not that great. Okay, the ACX royalty rate is 40%. Now, there was a time when it went up to 90% or something like that. Oh my God, I wish I was in it then, because we would have definitely been hitting the escalation numbers for it. But it's 40%. Now, we don't get the same royalty rate that many authors do. I can't tell you what it is, but it's higher than the standard rate, so we're closer.
There's a guy over there with a gun.
No, we're under an NDA with that one. I know when I'm under an NDA and when I'm not. So there's that aspect, but more importantly, the amount of marketing we get from Audible Studios is huge, and they do this for both our recorded books and the Audible Studio books. When Winter's Daughter came out, I had a whole marketing plan from them of like 30 pages, and we were on the front page of Audible's site for like, we were there for like 4 days. We were in the featured pre-orders for like a month and a half. They had a special section, the science fiction and fantasy section, where they had a review just from us, just for our books. So the amount of marketing we get from them, I mean, if I were to try to put a monetary number on the marketing, it'd probably be easily $300,000 worth of marketing. And if I was self-published, they wouldn't have as much incentive to push me, because they're getting a smaller percentage, So yeah.
Yeah, that's a situation where going through another publisher, you can see the return on that investment. I mean, when you go through them, you see what they're doing for you. It's sometimes hard to see it with a traditional publisher if they're not pushing you, but with audio, you definitely see it.
I will say this though. So the audio contracts are term limited. They only last for 5 or 7 years. And when they come up for renewal, the chances of those very old books having the same marketing push would be smaller. So what will happen is when they come up for renewal, I will either ask for another big paycheck coming from them in the form of an advance to re-up it, or I would take it over at that point, because a book that's that far from the front list, they're not going to market the way they're going to do a front list title. So in that case, I probably would take it over and self-publish it through an ACX. Keep the same narrator and have to re-record it because they own the recording. Have to do new covers. But yeah, if they're not offering me a huge, re-signing advance, then I would do it, but not for a first run title.
All right. Well, thank you so much for answering all our questions today.
You're
Do you
welcome.
have any projects you're working on now or anything that's coming out that you'd like to promote?
Always.
Don't do anything.
So Disappearance of Winter's Daughter, which we talked about earlier, is available only from our site. So you can buy it at www.riyra.com. There's a store on that site where people can buy that book directly from us, and they can get it in ebook, hardcover, paperback, or limited edition. The rares are all gone. The limited editions are almost all gone. I think I have about 70 of them left, and they'll be sold out. And the audiobook, of course, is through Audible Studios, audible.com. They can get that now. The next book being released traditionally is Age of War. Oh, look, we have an ARC, Age of War. This is being released July 3rd. It is the third book in a series. It's a 6-book series that Michael wrote the entire series for. Because of the fact that we kept the audio rights on this particular book, only the first 3 books will come out from Penguin Random House. The last 3 books of that series, there was a change in the corporate policy at Penguin Random House, and such they can't sign contracts now that don't have audiobooks. So the books 4, 5, and 6 will be coming from Kensington Publishing, and that will be a print-only deal. And for those who don't know, Kensington Publishing is the largest non-Big Five publisher there is, and they've just opened a new science fiction and fantasy imprint called Rebel Base, and we will be a featured product in their Rebel Base Select line. So that will be coming out about 9 months from now, and that will be Age of Legend.
All right, very cool. And what's your
next one?
Is the Riyra.com the best website to find you guys?
Yeah, I'm a little miffed by the fact that I still have 3 websites that have not been integrated.
Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, she also does the website.
So yes, Riyra.com is the main site. We also have the First Empire series, and we also have Hollow World. And all 3 of those should be under one website, but I've just been too busy with other stuff, and I haven't gotten to it. I gotta get taxes done first. That's the other thing I gotta do. So
I may fire you.
You might.
Does she do your taxes also? I need a Robin for my.
Well,
Seriously,
no.
work with contact
taxes, but I have to give them all the numbers. So I have
I sit on a couch and just eat bonbons and
think creative thoughts.
So I lie in a hammock and feel cool breezes.
He writes the books. He answers the emails. He
living the life of Riley here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I will put all the links and your books on it. This is episode 173 for us at marketingsff.com if folks want to come on by.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for hanging out with us and answering all the questions.
You're welcome. Hope we didn't dominate everything too much.
They've heard us talk before. It's good when the guests talk. So.
Yeah, we ramble.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.
Take it easy.